Okay, we should be live right now. So, welcome everyone to the Native Speakerism Undone, a live series that is created to dismantle false beliefs about non-native English teachers in the hopes to educate some while uplifting others to feel comfortable in their own skin. So far, we have had very interesting interviews from Rocio Rojas on teacher discrimination. We've had Joanna Twardowska talk about the importance of ELT language studies, teachers who have had a language degree and those teachers who just go through training courses and the difference between those two options. Then Graciela Martinez has spoken to us about the non-native student teachers' own perception and preconception of the RP and other accents of English, dispelling myths of native speakerism. We've spoken about, the last live was about how our students are affected by native speakerism. And today we have a sort of a bonus live with Hadar Shemesh, who has agreed to have an interview. And I'm really starstruck, honestly, because I'm a big fan. I follow her trainings on YouTube. I know about her courses, which she might want to talk about as well. But here we are. We're going to talk about mindset and challenges for showing up online as non-native teachers. And I need to introduce, because some people might not know who Hadar Shemesh is, and I feel like they might have been living under a rock because you're everywhere, Hadar. And she's a public figure, an ELT professional, influencer with over 800,000 subscribers on YouTube. And I want to first ask you, what made you say yes to this interview in the first place, Hadar?
Well, first of all, I'm always up for interesting and challenging conversations regarding teaching and the standards of teaching and accent and pronunciation and all of the things that we do. And also, I absolutely love the content that you share because I think it's so important for people to challenge their thinking about what is proper in English teaching. Specifically, I come from pronunciation and fluency work, and I definitely feel that there is a lot of bias around who should be teaching that. And I'm happy for the opportunity to challenge that and to share my experience. I also know that there are a lot of non-native speaking teachers who want to be to grow, to build their business or to become content creators. And the atmosphere is not very welcoming, or at least, we have built some beliefs that prevent us or people who want to do that from achieving success and from doing what they want because they believe that they should sound and look a certain way to be successful. And I'm here to challenge all that.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm happy that you said this. And the fact that, I think some people think that the online versus the real world are two things that are, not overlapping, or things that happen only in the online world and only in the outside or real world. But I feel like I think it's simultaneously happening. And if we see things online, it's because it happens also in real life, as we call it, as we perceive it, because, the online has become the new norm in a way, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I think they intersect, and it's no longer, when we think about English teaching, I definitely think that it's one whole. Of course, that if you look at very traditional, conventional institutions that only teach locally, then you would see certain things. They may not be open to things that are happening online. But I think the conversation is similar for, wherever you're at in the world trying to learn English.
Definitely. Did you feel like there was a sort of a barrier with you? Because when you go onto your channels, the first thing that you see is that you advertise yourself as a non-native teacher. And how did that come about? Did you have a conversation about that with anyone, with yourself even?
It's a good question. At the beginning, when I first started creating content, that was back in, I think the first video I shared was in 2012. And then I started creating content consistently since 2015. And I think during the first year of my journey as a YouTuber, I did not talk about the fact that I'm a non-native speaker. I would hide it because I thought that it would get in my way. So the name of my channel was Accents Way English. I didn't even have my name there. And I was very, very careful and cautious about my pronunciation. I didn't hide it, so I didn't lie. I didn't say I was a native speaker, but it
Mhm.
wasn't a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And I definitely, there was a point where I felt that it wasn't enough for me. Like I felt very limited, and I also felt like I'm not putting myself fully. I'm constantly concerned about people's feedback and criticism. And I said, I'm just going to say it loudly and proudly and be like, this is me,
Mhm.
which means you get me as I am with the content that I teach, but also with potential mistakes because I make mistakes. This is not my first language, right?
Yeah.
When I teach, I'm very precise about what I teach. I only teach, I research the work, what I teach. So I'm very confident in how I teach and what I teach. But there's a lot of conversation that is happening on my videos and episodes. And I said, if I am constantly feeling like I have to be perfect, I feel like my videos or the work that I'm putting out there is not aligned with all the things that I'm able to offer. And
Mhm.
and then I made a video saying this is my story, I'm and for me that was permission to be me, right? The moment I did that, and then I started, and also I shifted my teaching philosophy, because
Mhm.
I come from acting. And the reason why I sound the way I sound right now is because I trained as an actress, because my purpose was to get roles in the US. I lived in the US for a few years. I studied acting there. And the purpose was to be cast as an American, right? Because there were a lot of more
Yeah.
opportunities for
I
for
actually
for
read that
roles.
about you, and it all made sense to me there and then, because often, people pass as native speakers even when they're not, because there is a whole perception of what native speakers sound like, right? And so the
Right.
idea behind this, oh, you are a native speaker, but I keep saying, well, it's all about, and we'll get into this a bit more a little later, about having a mixed accent and having been exposed to a variety of accents, and not everyone is an actor to be able to kind of
Right.
impersonate or sound someone like they're not, right? And we often tell our learners that that's not the end game and that's not the end goal that they have. But when I read that, it totally kind of resonated with me. I was like, oh, now I get it, why she might sound the way she does. And so you actively did that to sound like an American
Yeah,
speaker?
we had in school, we had speech and pronunciation classes for all accents, right? So for the native speakers and the non-native speakers, we learned all the sounds of English, and then we learned different dialects of English, so that we would have this versatility
Had
when
a
we
role,
work on
yeah,
a
had a
specific
part, yeah.
role. Exactly. And really, like, I knew that my opportunities were very limited when having a non-standard accent.
Of course.
So that was the purpose, and I think that I had to work really hard for it, and I think that no one needs to work as hard if if your aim is to feel confident in a language, is to feel fluent. I always say
Mhm.
you have to sound like a native if you're working towards becoming an actor in the US or Canada or whatever, or you're,
Or as David Crystal often puts it, if you want to be a spy or an impersonator.
exactly, it's in Secret Service. Absolutely. That's it.
Exactly.
But other
That's
than
it.
that,
Yeah, there's no
there is no
reason
need.
for it. There's no reason for it. But here's a question that might put you a little off guard. So people might feel like you had so much success because you sound like a native, right? And it's easy for you to attract followers, because ultimately that's the thing. That's the students often say or manifest this and say, I want to sound like a native speaker. So do you think that has played a part in your success in any way?
This is a really good question. Like, I definitely, when people hear me, the first time they hear me and they know nothing about me, obviously it's easier to get them in the door, because people have these biases, or of the authority of the, like, people who have authority in the language are native speakers. So for a second, for the first few minutes, yes, it potentially, I could grab them in a different way. It is definitely a privilege, and I'm aware of it.
Mhm.
However, how many content creators or YouTubers do we know who are native speakers, who have a certain accent, and they don't have the platform that I have or the success that I have? So having an accent is not enough for I believe, is not the reason, or is not mostly the reason for why I am where I am today. And I I say that because I recognize the privilege, and I recognize it played a part, but it doesn't get people to stay, right? It's not the reason why people stay, because people ultimately stay for the change that they want to see, for the change that they see, right? So ultimately,
I
it's the
definitely, I agree
value,
with
it's
you.
the lessons, it's the consistency, it's creating a safe environment for them to thrive. It's I have an offline community, an online community on Facebook where they can connect and interact, and it's absolutely free. So there is a lot more that goes into building any platform than the package. So obviously, I think, and I also think that people are curious. They're
Mm-hmm.
curious. It's not the sounds that attract them. I don't want to narrow it to just an accent, but it's actually like, they see me and they see that I'm confident in English, that I create
True.
content in English,
Yeah.
that it's accessible to me, and they want to know how it's possible. So for them, it's the accent, but we know that it
Mm-hmm.
really is just feeling like yourself in another language, and that's what they see. So
Mm-hmm.
when this question comes up, what I'm thinking is that, it really shows maybe an underlying belief that um, you can only succeed in our industry if you have a native like accent. And my case could be like just validation of it. But the reason why I have this platform is because I worked really, really, really hard for it. For the first 2 years where I created content with the same accent, I only had a few hundreds of views for each video that I would create for 2 years, right? So posting consistently, and this is it. This is the thing. Like, we could find a lot of reasons for why things may not work, but it's so important to understand that if you do the work, if you offer value, if you know who you're serving, if you are there for them no matter what, you will succeed. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's just a
I'm so
matter
glad you're saying
of
that. I
focus.
believe that absolutely, and I think yeah, the confidence that you have to. It's harder when you think that what the ELT industry sometimes does, as you said, the voices of authority sometimes don't confirm this, and so when you see that and your learners are looking for that because it's so advertised, and online teachers often do that, right? The content that you see on Instagram, on Facebook, or anywhere you go, it's all, the messaging is quite similar there. You are not saying things correctly. You need to be saying it with this type of accent. There is no really distinction between what native speaker accent is. It's just that you're not saying it right.
Yeah,
And as a teacher, I think the repercussion of it is that as a teacher as well, you feel that, okay, I can't offer that to, the market's demand. It's not someone who sounds like me,
yeah,
right? And there's a lot of education that needs to be given, and I think it just has to be there for the masses, because there's a lot of research and a lot of linguists have written about it. And I think the educational world, more or less, must be or should be educated enough to have read those things and understood, all these little nuances of, identity, and how people sound, and what accent truly is, and what is the difference of, language is evolving. And I don't want to go too deep down into, the dynamics of it, but I feel like it is really this negative backlash of all the things that we're seeing online and offline that are causing teachers to just, non-native teachers to just go, oh, well, I don't know even how I'm supposed to handle this right now.
absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the problem starts with the fact that, people want to get views. And to get views, you harness negativity, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what people are drawn to. And how
Yeah.
do you harness negativity? You just make people feel bad about
Yeah.
themselves.
Inadequate.
And
Yeah.
exactly, like they're not good enough, they're not doing something right, they messed it up again, and it just validates people's deepest fears. So they're on the alert and they want to watch more of it, and like they feel there is a quick fix there.
Yeah.
This would help them, not sound like this or that, and then these messages, they keep hearing these messages and they start believing in them. Both are students and definitely teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that whoever has a platform, their responsibility is to go not only to not subscribe to these methods and trends. I know that if I were to use some of the trends, stop saying this, stop saying that, do
Yeah.
this to sound smarter, do this to sound more intelligent, do this to sound more like a native, I would get, I would 10x my views. But I refuse to do that because I take responsibility. I think that my platform is a place for people to actually make a change and not just to get views. And I think that people sometimes confuse it. And then they do things that might harm their followers. And I think, and as a byproduct, future teachers or content creators who would not dare to go up there because who are like the imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome exists anyway for non-native teachers, right?
Hmm.
And even more so for content creators. So
Yeah.
we need to keep on this conversation going, and also and to re-educate both our peers and our students, and also push and to give more voice to different accents, different languages, different accents, different Englishes, um,
Hmm.
so that people understand that there is no one standard.
Absolutely. And the fact, you mentioned this, and I love this fact about you that, you stay true to who you are and your integrity by not doing that, even though you know that it might fast track even more. So, your career and the fact that, people would be feeling inadequate and maybe even clicking more just to know what they can do to, get to that next level faster and, not have any kind of people judging them for how they sound and
Yeah.
how they speak. But more often than not, what's kind of hilarious to me is that a lot of non-native teachers with a heavy accent kind of, which is nothing is wrong with that, but what they do is they accentuate that you shouldn't say things this way but say that way. And I just, even if their content had been valid, I could just not follow, because it just shows me that with, if they are in fact educated teachers who care for their learners, I just couldn't agree to kind of looking at those kind of things. And it's
Yeah.
just cringy, to me. I'm like, how can you not embrace your identity? You are not a native speaker. And what you're doing is saying that you have, a solution for that, for regular people, not actors, not impersonators, not, and you're forcing them to feel that discomfort that you yourself might be feeling. And it's just absurd to me, right? It's hilarious and absurd at the same time, and quite pathetic if you think. It's
It,
just.
yeah, and I think that this is, it's something that hasn't evolved in their journey, because I definitely feel that there is a lot of first there's a lot that goes into it. One is like wanting to gain more followers, knowing what works and doing what works, right? Really, like ultimately, a lot of times it just ends up being that,
Mhm.
with not a lot of like, without asking themselves, what are my values? Right? What do I want? What is the impact that I want to have? Like they're not asking the right questions. And while asking the right questions might get them to might take them a little longer to get
Mhm.
where they want to be, they will be in alignment. And ultimately, your business is not just the number of views that you have. You may have hundreds and thousands of followers, but you may not have a profitable business, right? To get
Yeah.
people to join your courses requires a lot more than a lot of views. And they need to feel like there is someone in alignment. And when
Mhm.
you feel, and our audience, we have smart people in our audience
Exactly.
who know how to recognize when something is, they can learn with it, but they can also say, it just
Something
doesn't
is
feel
off.
authentic. Yes. So I think that content creators should really ask themselves those questions
Yeah, look like
before
more in the
putting
long
out
run
content.
rather than just do these little things and then afterwards, like you said, there's no alignment, with
Yeah.
what they're teaching and what they're doing. A viral video isn't enough to quite, make it for someone. So yeah, I totally agree with that as well. So I'm going to quote David Crystal again in Sounds Appealing. He said, "Mixed accents." Since you're an expert in accents and you teach it very well, and I wanted to ask you this question. So he said, "Mixed accents are the norm these days. Even if you don't travel, you're not immune from accent shift. And
Hmm.
innumerable voices enter your home every day through radio, television, the telephone, and the internet." What do you think about mixed accents, like the one I have, for instance?
Great. I don't have any particular um I mean, obviously, I was trained as learning the American accent. I also lived in the U.S. and in New York for 5 years, so obviously it had an effect on me. But I'm all about. I don't think that anyone should pick a specific accent and use it. I'm all about clarity over
Yeah.
accuracy. So
Hmm.
accuracy is like the book of accents, right? These are the
Yeah.
sounds that you need to use for a particular dialect. Who cares? As long as you are clear, that is what matters. And that's what I tell my students. And
Hmm.
here's the thing. I'm going to give you an example. I teach the American accent. So obviously, when people go through my courses, when they learn about the R, I teach it at the beginning of a word and after a vowel.
Yeah.
And for some people, that may be more challenging for them. So they might be able to pronounce the R at the beginning of a word, but it would be harder for them to pronounce it at the end. So I would just tell them, don't pronounce it at the end because it's completely legit and clear that way. Because in all British accents and some American accents,
Yeah.
people drop the R. Drop
Non-rhotic.
the R.
Yeah.
Drop the R.
Absolutely.
Don't focus on it, right? Pick your battles. Don't flap the
Hmm.
T if it creates issues or you feel like when you say the word order, you get stressed out. Don't pronounce the T normally,
Yeah.
right? Like there is no reason to pick on something if it doesn't feel comfortable. The whole idea of teaching sounds or learning sounds is to optimize your speech, to be clearer and to not put in a lot of effort into your speech, right? That is why I'm so passionate about pronunciation. It gives you tools to
Hmm.
be a better communicator and to really feel good about delivering your message. But you, once you start obsessing over it, or once it gets you get caught up on a specific sound, this is where it gets problematic, right? That's not the purpose of this work. So I'm all about mixed accents. I think this is usually what ends up happening for any non-native speaker. I'm the exception because really I trained as an actress. I did a completely different work, um, and a different process. And I think that should not be the case for learners. As
Hmm.
long as they're clear and as long as they get what they want by communicating their message clearly, we're good. And one more thing I'm going to say about this.
Hmm.
I think the accent teaching, right, or accent reduction, which is like a title I despise.
Yeah.
Reduction, reducing what accent? Everyone, no matter what you end up with, it's an accent.
Yeah.
Um, it's taught, or it has been taught from the perspective of the listener, of the native speaker
Hmm.
listening, right?
Hmm.
It's like how to make them comfortable. No, how are you going to be comfortable? This is the question. How can you become as comfortable as possible when you're communicating in English? That is the purpose of this work, not to get other people to feel comfortable listening to you.
Absolutely. I couldn't, and as you're speaking, like I'm thinking about so many different things, like getting a call from a private learner who asks me or who starts talking to me. And I learned very soon in my career to kind of answer the phone in English, because if I answered in Italian, automatically someone would believe that I wasn't good at speaking English and that I was Italian. And so I thought, okay, if I saw that someone was calling me from an ad that they had seen, I would answer the phone in English, and then they would go like, "But okay, so you are a teacher from where?" And then it was like, "But is it more of an American English or a British English that you teach?" And they were literally at ABC level, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, I can't believe that this is even a question that one might ask, because it's so strange that you're reflecting on such, nuances when there's so much to be done. And literally there's no, you could be taking yourself through those levels if you were really passionate about learning a language without even someone telling you how to pronounce or, helping you. And it just amazes me, like the focus that is placed on this,
Well,
on
they
this
don't
topic.
know, like they've, these are the messages that they've received, and they simply don't know. And I think that it's our job to educate, like to help them understand.
Hmm.
Ultimately, I say, they come for one thing, but I give them what they actually need. Right. So it's important that we have that conversation because they don't have anywhere else to learn it. That accent, it doesn't matter, or there's like overlap of all these different sounds across all these different dialects. So it really doesn't matter if you want to, especially if you're first starting out.
Hmm.
So I used to have those conversations all the time as well when I used to teach one-on-one. 15 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, when people would challenge um, my ability to teach them before I had the platform that I have today, be like, but you're a non-native speaker, right?
Mm,
How is it possible that you teach pronunciation, right? How is it possible? And
yeah.
then you have to have that conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
it would be good for some people, and for some, no, it's fine.
exactly. I think so too. Like, you don't have to sell yourself to everyone. If someone doesn't want your services because they might think XYZ is better for them, they should go with someone different and someone else. There are people who, there are exceptions, people who are passionate about that particular sound. They kind of fall in love with it. I've never deliberately wanted to sound like with any accent, or I just wanted, like you said, to be clear in my pronunciation, that people could understand me. And then in the process, it's really nice to listen to someone who might be making like 1,001 mistakes but still understand them. And I'm like, oh, I couldn't have done that if I hadn't exposed myself to a variety of accents,
Right.
and try to really, like, I force myself to understand, which I think that most speakers or of monolingual languages don't often take that step further to try to understand. And with English being such a dominant language, people think, okay, if you are speaking my language, then you are the one who's supposed to work 1,000
Yeah.
times harder to get your message across. And I'll tell you if you're doing it right or wrong, right? It's like
Right.
this type of perception
No,
we get.
and this is definitely something that I incorporate in my teaching, reminding my students that it's not just their responsibility, right? Because
Mm,
they're so terrified of going into a conversation and not understanding someone, or them not understanding them. And
yeah,
I say, if they don't understand you, it's not just your fault. It's also, they need to be better listeners, right? Or they need to give you the feeling that it's okay and that you have time, and not to make you feel like you are wasting their time, right? So
exactly.
good communication happens when two people are involved. So when something is not going in the right direction, or you feel that you messed up, it's not just you. And it's really important to remember that. And I think that native speakers need to be educated about how to listen to people that don't sound like them. But unfortunately, we can't do that. I
Yeah.
mean, we can offer it, but we can't do it. So I do work with the people who come to me asking for help, by opening their minds, but also giving them the tools to know what to do if they experience miscommunication.
Listening strategies, really, and communication strategies, right? To get the message across and to receive the message in a clear way that obviously there is
Yeah,
no
and
loss in the
sometimes
communication.
pronunciation, because if a student replaces R's and L's
Of
and
course.
faces lack of communication, then they need to know what to do with their mouth, so that what they say is aligned with what people expect to hear. Otherwise, they're going to be the ones paying the price. Of course, I could say, oh, they could have noticed that this is um, a replacement, or you're swapping these sounds, and of course, but obviously, I'm not equipping them with the best tools. So and this is why I'm saying, like, it's the clarity that matters. Use the right, like, know what the sounds are, know how to produce them, so
Mhm.
that, so again, that you're able to say what you want to say without having to compromise your message.
Yes, yes, exactly. Um, do your students, even though this communication is quite clear at this stage, do you still get the odd student asking you, how can I sound like you? Do they still say that? And how do you respond to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I say this because obviously they have this belief that sounding like me would open doors for them. So I'm asking, what does it mean? What would that feel like for you? Sounding like a
Mhm.
native, or sounding like me, right? What would
What
that
would you do
mean?
with it? Yeah.
What would you do with it? What would that mean? What would that make you feel? So I'm trying them to be a bit more specific about the experience and the feeling. And then I hear things like freedom, and I'm going to go, open my own YouTube channel, or apply for a job and do all those things. And then I say, okay, but do you really feel, so let's work towards those things. And those things are not connected to your accent. Those things are connected to your confidence, and how available the language is, and how you're able to express yourself. So there are all these other things that have nothing to do with the sounds that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
or you sounding like a native or not like a native, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think, and also to talk about what, asking them, why do you want to eliminate an aspect that is a part of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we need to go a little deeper there. Are you ashamed? Are you trying to hide it? Do you feel that like it's getting in your way? Are you uncomfortable? I have a lot of students who are not ashamed of their identity. They're just tired of hearing people asking them, where are you from, even though they've been living in the US for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I never judge why people ask for certain things. I just try to make sure that what they're striving for is for the right reason. So they're clear about what the end goal is. So they understand it's not an accent, it's this internal permission and freedom that they want to feel. And how do we
Mm-hmm.
get that without necessarily just doing this work? And at the
Yeah.
same time, I offer them the work that I do, pronunciation, because I do believe that it helps with so many different things, not just sounding like some,
Yes.
like a native.
Someone other than
Definitely, I never
yourself.
use sound like me because I feel like no.
Yeah, it does sound kind of strange. When people said that, actually during a live, someone said that, and I was like, my content is just against that. How could you be? And often it's just the perception, sometimes someone who speaks quite fast or is fluent, automatically native speaker. And in our field, a lot of people say that, well, that is what sells. That is a very, people want to learn from someone who has gone through the English curriculum and knows exactly, that they have lived and breathed sort of the English language, right? So they would be the ones. And this is something I hear often. So I'm going to ask you this, like, what would you say to those people who say, like, those, ultimately, at the end of the day, when someone is uncertain about something, they ask a native speaker, how would you say it? And that's the ultimate kind of check if you got it right. What do you think about that?
Well, I have to say that sometimes I ask native speakers how they say something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like and I have a teacher who is a native speaker, and then she comes to me and she's like, "How would you say this word?" I don't think anyone has any authority over how things are said. First of all, because there are some things that are said in different ways depending on the dialect. There are some words that have different pronunciations. So,
I was going to
ultimately,
say I ask Google. I don't go to my native speaker
I
because
ask
sometimes
Google. I go to the dictionary. Yeah, like I don't feel anyone is an authority in the language unless, they are I don't know, that's their job. Um so
but even
I
as
don't
their
I
job, like I remember in teacher training courses, our tutors kind of were very, very, both in Celta and Delta. I had the same tutors, and they were always like about 3 or 4 people, okay, not just one. And they would go about saying, it's okay to make mistakes. And if you don't know something, that is totally human. And don't think that it's because you're a non-native or a native or, XYZ
right.
reasons for why. You just go home, you read up and offer the explanation the next day. You can't be like a walking dictionary of everything. And plus, language is in constant evolution. There are things changing, and the things that go into the dictionary, literally evolve, and people create those things, right? And so it's like, it's not, like you said, it's not about the authority. I would go to a teacher, maybe colleague, and say, have you noticed this happen? Or what would you say? Would you say this is correct? Or would you say this is wrong? And more often than not, what it leads to is like this dichotomy where everyone is against each other, and it's like, no, I know better because I learned English as a second language, and I know everything about the grammar,
Mm.
and because I've studied it and you haven't. And then there's the attack of, well, I've spoken it since I was born in a place, and who are you to speak? And it kind of goes into this very comical kind of scenario where people are validating themselves. But I've taught 14 years and I've been here for four. And everyone says, no, who is older? Who is wiser? Who's had more experience in the field? And it's just kind of extreme, wouldn't you say? Like, why do you think it's so important that they claim this
I
power of
mean,
saying whether someone
let's just leave it for the students to decide, right? The students will decide who helps them the most, who gets them value. For some speaker, like it really is a method that is aligned with how students are uh what's the word? Are wired to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the this conversation is trying to say I'm a better teacher than you because this and that. Like it doesn't matter what your credentials are, if you're a native speaker or a non-native speaker. If you know how to simplify the language to someone who is earlier in the journey than you, then
Mm-hmm.
you're a good teacher, right? Like if you know how to communicate, to make them feel safe, to make them feel like they're on track, to understand how to process their progress, then you're a good teacher. Like it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter what the background is. And
Yeah.
and of course, like I think it's really important to educate yourself and to learn and to open yourself up to to different methodologies and theories, right? Like as like I do that all the time. But be humble because
Yes.
there must be something that you don't know. And I wanted to say, based on like back to what we said before, as a non-native teacher, you will find yourself in situations where you say something and someone might challenge you or ask you a question that you're uncertain of. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the most important thing is to be open about it, about that, the fact that you don't know, because there's nothing worse than giving an answer that you're uncertain of. And also, maybe even if you find out that it wasn't the right answer, not correcting yourself. Because ultimately, that could break the trust between you and the student. And there's nothing wrong
Mm-hmm.
about not knowing, but there is everything wrong about not being upfront about, hey, let's discover this together, let's look it up together. There's nothing to be ashamed of it,
Yes.
but you will break the trust if they find out that something that you said was incorrect.
Yes. And I take it upon myself to remind that native speakers can do that also and not just justify everything with, we say it that way.
This is how I say it. 100%. I see, like, I've watched videos of native speaking, like native. The reason why I said non-native teachers because we're a lot more sensitive to it, so
Of
we're more
course,
likely
yes,
to
we
do
have the
this.
imposter syndrome, as you were saying, and so we feel like if
Exactly.
we say that we don't know something out loud, we lose credibility altogether. Whereas, I sometimes I catch myself saying we don't, and I'm like, ooh, me and what army? Who am I talking about? Who's we? And I
Exactly. Yeah.
backtrack and I correct myself because it's like inside of you. It gets inside, and I've lost my identity several times just by reading up on these issues, right? But and moving around and going from place to place, and having a variety of accents in my life. Let's put it this way. So it
Yeah.
kind of it's daunting to always have to justify yourself, find a reason why you say this way, and how you might have not grown or have not encountered a specific word that a student might be asking you. So it's just uh like I said, it's like we don't want to justify it with this is how I say it and that's the way it is, and we don't also want to deny that we have made a mistake or might not know something and make play it off as if we are human ultimately, right? This is
Absolutely.
just, yeah, it's so human, I think, and it's so, I find it quite encouraging when I see someone just kind of admit and say, I'll get back to you on that for a sec, I need to think about it. I think
Right.
that raises my respect towards the other human to a greater level, because I'm like, okay, that's
Yeah.
honest, that's honesty,
Yeah. We're
you know
constant learners,
yeah.
as teachers, no matter what language we speak. And yeah, absolutely.
hmm So we were talking. So the title of our topic today was mindset and challenges for showing up online as non-native teachers. Even though in what we were saying, you said that it is kind of a longer route if we're trying to not use those, kind of clickbaity titles, get people to feel inadequate and feel, not let's say at the top of their hierarchy, let's say, to be the ones teaching the language, etc., etc. So you yourself have had this challenge, I'm guessing, to kind of choose the other way and go, take the longer route. Would you suggest, like, what would your top 3 tips, let's say, be if someone were to want to teach online, build courses around, speaking English fluently? What would you say to them to not go into that? parallel
Yeah.
world of don't say this and don't say that.
Yeah. So parallel world, or let's say like another parallel world where they hide and they don't do anything because they're
Exactly.
afraid of
Yeah.
criticism, you know, which is more of my concern, because I think most of the people, that's where they go. They just don't create, or they wait until they get better or until the circumstances are right.
Yeah.
And I want to say, okay, so first of all, I think that you get better as you create, right? It's like it's just how it is. Like we tell our students, you want to get better at being fluent, you want to get fluent, you got to speak more, and the act of speaking is the work that you need to do to
Hmm.
get fluent. So ultimately, if you want to be a confident in teaching English in front of the camera, which is sometimes different than teaching it to a class or on Zoom, because you're very self-conscious, you're thinking about all your critics, you're
Hmm.
thinking about all your, ex-boyfriends and girlfriends that like just, watch it and would
My wife.
criticize you on social media, right? So you're thinking about all those things as you're creating content. And the thing is that you're not going to be necessarily good at the beginning, and the only thing that is going to help you get better and become more confident is the act of doing and creating. So make a commitment that this is what you want to do and stay consistent. Commit to
Hmm.
the end goal, right? And not and by that, commit to the process. I think people quit very early on. Like they post a few videos, they might get criticism or negative feedback, they might not get the views that they're expecting, and then they might quit. And
Yeah.
I think this is very, very dangerous, because we're used to like seeing all these people with these big platforms and we want that. But we need to remember it's not an overnight success, right? It's a lot of hard work that was done in the background that one day things started picking up.
Hmm.
And trust that that is going to be the case for you as well. And like I said, always have the the best of, you want to have the best, or to offer the best for your students, right?
Hmm.
You really want them to see results. And as you're thinking about what content to create, think about who your audience is, right? Like is it think about a specific person, maybe a student that you'd say to yourself, oh, I wish all my students were just like this person, right?
Hmm.
And have them in mind and create content for them, and think, would this be beneficial for them? Would they, would this speak to them? Am I speaking to their pain points? Am I talking about the things that they need to hear? Am I giving them guidance? So really have clarity in mind around who you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And when you are trying to decide what type of content is going to be valuable, just really put it, like, ask yourself, if they saw this, would they love it? Would they feel good about it? I really believe in like karma and good energy and positive energy. And the moment people feel anxious watching your videos for some reason, is
You're playing on
probably,
their insecurities. Yeah.
yeah, is probably not the right strategy if you're
Mm.
thinking of positive teaching, right? Like
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
negative teaching.
Yeah. And if when you are a teacher, I think non-teachers do that often. Like I don't feel, because everyone has become a sort of a, it's like a phenomenon. I'll turn on my camera and I say something in a language that I speak, and that somehow becomes content for someone else to learn from. But I
Mhm.
feel that there's so many, so many steps before that, obviously, before you can call yourself even just content creator. There's a lot to, content creation. And it's just come down to making as many videos, and the quality of it is going very, very low. It really needs to come from it has to be thought through and not just anybody. It's not anybody's business. Wouldn't you agree? It's just not.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that, oh, about what you said, it's really important to have the real life experience of teaching if you want to be
Yes.
a good content creator.
Yeah.
I started creating content after 8 years of teaching one-on-one in groups, right? Like for that was my full-time job.
Hmm.
I mean, it was my own business, but still, I when I was creating content, I was speaking from experience, knowing how my students think. And
Hmm.
if you start as a content creator, and let's say you want to start a course, an online course, which is great. Like, I think if you have something to offer, go ahead, do it, but build experience interacting with students and teaching, because you will always be surprised about how much you don't know and how much you need to incorporate more into your teaching and definitely into your courses. And the real experience is invaluable.
Definitely. Oh, I agree with everything you've said there. We have one comment actually from Graciela Martinez who says, totally agree. Native speakers assume non-natives have to make the effort to understand them. However, they'll make very little effort to understand. Their listening skills are quite poor. Sometimes they are because they're not used to probably the variety of, let's say, foreign accents, foreign to them, as in, and so they find that I would say they're a bit intolerant of ambiguity. And so when something doesn't sound the way they themselves would pronounce it, then it's kind of the message is lost on them. And often, but it's not only, native speakers from, I think, English speaking countries, but generally monolingual societies, this is what happens when someone else says something in a different way. You're just not used to it. And so you give up altogether.
Yeah, but also for our learners, let's say, the typical learner who learns with YouTube is exposed to a very particular accent, or maybe
True.
two. You're not exposed to different dialects. So they think that if, let's say, they hear a certain dialect, non-standard, that a native dialect that is non-standard, they would treat it as bad English, right? African American vernacular English, for example. No, it's improper. No, it's not improper. It's a dialect of it's English, right? It is. You're just not exposed to it. So I also have a responsibility as a teacher, and that's what we do in our courses, to exposing our students to different varieties of English so that they know that there isn't just this one standard, because our bias is derived from this understanding. And then we think that people who have accents are not native or non-native, not be good speakers, which is, a ridiculous assumption.
Absolutely. So thank you, Hadar. I know you have to run, and we have reached, I think, a good amount of valuable content that I'm sure the listeners and viewers can watch and rewatch. This will be available for replay at a later stage as well. So leave your comments or anything you have for us. We might get back to you again on those things. I just wanted to remind you that on the 7th of May, I'm going to host another session of the Native Speakerism Undone series with Jen Diaz-Green on the privilege of sounding like a native speaker. ? Is there a privilege or not? We're going to question that. And then Vincent Richard on the 17th of May, tackling native speakerism from a legal perspective. Because as you know, there are a lot of people who are just not given job opportunities simply because they are non-native. Or because of their nationality, or they might be holding the wrong type of passport. So we're going to look into like how you can move legally towards, in those countries where this is actually deemed to be discriminatory practice. So before we close, if you follow me on social media, you already know I have only 8 spots to fill with members for my ongoing project. And after which I'll be relaunching my website and prices. So go to the nonnativespeaker.com to join my membership today. Thanks again, Hadar, for being here. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mary. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine. Bye. Thank you.